welcome to the Rock's Back Pages podcast. I'm Barney Hoskins, and I'm in London with my colleagues Jasper Mirison Bowie.
Hello, Barney.
And William Pike.
Hi, Barney.
And joining us for this episode, all the way from New York City, is Mr. Tim Page. Welcome, Tim.
I'm so happy to be here, Barney. Good to talk with you.
Tim was not only the chief classical music critic for the Washington Post, he won the Pulitzer Prize for criticism 2 years into his tenure at that paper. He's also written about pop and rock artists and even contributed several pieces to New York Rocker, no less, in 1979. Tim, do you mind if we start with a quote from the preface to your 2002 book, Tim Page on Music?
Oh, I'd be delighted, actually.
Well, let me just read this a little bit, just to get us underway. From the beginning, it was my intention to infuse some of the passion, elusiveness, and occasional irreverence I found in the best writing about jazz and rock into the realm of classical music criticism. And then you go on, you say, I saw no reason why a high, quote unquote, art was necessarily compelled to be an unrelentingly solemn and straightened one. Tim, do you feel you stayed true to that infusion?
Yeah, I do. I often tell people about how I got interested in writing about music. And, the magazine I read a whole lot of, as well as, High Fidelity Stereo Review, was Rolling Stone. And the early Rolling Stone really captivated me. I'm sure I'm going to give you the same dates that it seems have captivated everybody. I read it nonstop from about the first issue, and then, more or less stopped when they moved to New York. But I was fascinated by it. I loved the way it was written. I loved the fact that it was intelligent and talked about a variety of different, musics. And it was just so much fun to read, and I was also reading all the other stuff. But that had a big part in why I wrote the way I wrote. And, some places are friendlier to that kind of writing than others. But, I believe in the first person, as long as it's not just, showing off your writing or something like that. Because one of the things I didn't like about classical music was all these people seemed to think that they were writing home truths. And I always was more comfortable writing about things that really fascinated me. And I've continued to do that, I mean, it was a different style. I think it maybe has affected some other classical musicians. Oh, another person I should thank is John Rockwell, because John Rockwell was the guy who said, hey, we're going to bring you into the Times, okay, where I was for about 5.5 years. And he was writing about all kinds of music. So I hope that's helpful.
That's very helpful. I was going to ask you what were the first, like rock magazines that you read, and you've answered that question. What I would then go on to ask is how you, considering you're so famous for writing about, everything from Sibelius to, Kathleen Battle, how you came to review James Chance and the Contortions at Club 57.
Well, that was my friend Andy Schwartz, who was actually the very first person who used me occasionally. And he suggested that I go to that. My first article for him was about a band called Model Citizens, which was published in late 78. But then he used me for a bit. And I love New York Rocker, and I read it, and I also read Rock, and I also read Crawdaddy, but it wasn't really quite what I really wanted to do. And also, there were so many really good rock writers around there, most of whom wrote for Andy or The Voice or the Soho News. And I also discovered that I was sort of the only guy writing about classical music this way. So, I just kept on going in that direction. And then the Times asked me to come in and write for them. And so I did that for quite a while. And yeah, that's it.
Did you get much pushback for the way that you wrote about classical from people that were more entrenched in that classical world?
I don't really think so. I always knew my stuff. They might say, "Oh, this is too candid for me," and I didn't really fit as well as I might have into the New York Times way back then. And I wrote very little rock for the New York Times too. A couple of things which touched on it, but I started doing more. I started with rock in New York Rocker, and then I did Soho News, anything that I wanted to do. And then for Times, I was a junior critic. And so I didn't hear a whole lot of any kind of pop music during my time there. But once I got to Newsday, they would ask me to cover things like, the Bowie Glass Spider tour, Steve Forbert and Van Morrison. I think I did Rod Stewart because there was nobody else there once. But, I was fine with it. And, my style was my style. And by Newsday, I could actually say that. And then Washington Post asked me to come down and be chief critic. But I could really write about anything I wanted. There I started writing also a lot about authors and silent films and the other obsessions I have, which is quite a long list, actually.
How did your writing change as you moved from publication to publication, and ultimately from the New York Times to Newsday and then to the Washington Post? Did your writing evolve in ways that you remember?
Yeah, I would say it did. The Times is a very top-down editorial paper, and I was writing an awful lot for them. So, there's an awful lot of stuff that I wrote for the New York Times that I'd love to erase now. But, I learned, I got better. I had begun to really develop my own voice. And then right then, Newsday, which had Newsday is a Long Island newspaper, but for about 10 years or so, they also had a New York Newsday. And they hired me, and I went there. And in some ways, I think that's some of my very best writing, because I could say anything I wanted. No editor would question me and say, "Are you sure you want to say that?" Maybe it would have been good if they had said that a few times. But I wrote for Newsday for about 8.5 years. But then the Post called me down and told me I could write about whatever I wanted in any style I wanted. And I love that, But I think, there was more editing at the Post than there was at Newsday. Because, there's a legend, and it's probably a true legend, that an awful lot of people really don't know much about classical music if they're editors. And so they let me get away with referencing Thomas Pynchon and, all sorts of stuff. And they were just fine with it. It was great. They never said, "Who is this person?" Because I figured if people were going to read me, Pynchon was a real hero of mine. And I loved the way he could combine just utter silliness with, rapturously beautiful prose. And he did the liner notes for a record for me when I was at Catalyst at RCA. And he wrote liner notes about Spike Jones, which I was pretty excited about.
Did you meet Pynchon?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. Sure. Okay. All right.
I spent a lot of time with him.
Did you? Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we both he has one son. I don't think I'm betraying any secrets here, but I was now running this record company called Catalyst. And I wrote to his agent, of course, expecting that I'd get nothing. But he had mentioned Spike Jones and Spike Jones Jr. in the prelude to his book Slow Learner, which are all where he tears apart most of his very early short stories. And so I wrote a note, and to my amazement, I got a call back maybe an hour after I'd sent this in. And to my even greater amazement, he wrote about 3,000 words for me.
Wonderful.
Oh, what a joy.
It was a joy. He's a lovely, lovely man. And I don't say much more than that about him. But he's a very nice man.
No. I bet he is. I'm a huge fan as well. Listen, how did it feel to win the Pulitzer in 1997? And I mean, did it change your estimation of yourself, your sense of yourself, change your life in any way?
I'm sorry to be so autobiographical here, but it's the way I write. And so I'll give you an answer. I was terrified, and in the old days, the three runners up, they usually escaped onto online. So I'd known for about a month that I was one of three people who might get it. But there was a lot of other stuff going on in my life then. My family life was a wreck. My mother had Alzheimer's disease. And on 4 days after I was rewarded the Pulitzer, my best friend died. And so it was all a crazy time. I was also working on writing about this author whom I love, woman named Dawn Powell.
Yep.
And I've continued writing about her and doing other things. But I was crazy as a loon when it happened. And that's about the time I was never able to fall asleep easily again, because it was just all so chaotic. And, now I think it's a pretty good thing. But 1997 was a horrible year.
Okay.
I started getting more invitations places. And then only 2 years after winning the Pulitzer, I decided I was going to go try to run an orchestra, which was the most insane thing that I ever did in my life. I was terrible at it. And then I got divorced. So anyway, it was an awful year. Nowadays, on the rare chances I consider it, I think, hey, that's pretty cool, and I know certainly one of the words that'll be in the first line of my obituary.
Yeah. Well, okay. So prizes don't make everything all right forever, do they? It's kind of what you're saying. I wanted to bring in William here because he told me he had seen at least a bit of A Day with Timmy Page.
Oh gosh.
Sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to embarrass
right.
you, but
it's there.
I wondered what William had made of that, and so just what did you think, William?
Yeah, I watched a little bit of A Day with Timmy Page this morning, which I think came out in 1967, I believe, Tim.
Yeah. Look just the same, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I know you anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you were a very cute 7-year-old and actually very articulate, which is unsurprising given your career afterwards. And interestingly, in the YouTube video, the director of the film gives an introduction where he's clearly very proud of the film that he made and you made together. And what's great is your creative output at that age. So you were talking about a film where children took over the world, I believe. And that's some of where I got to. So I'd love to hear what your memories of that are and if you can expand on that.
I have very mixed feelings about the film, not because of Dave Hoffman and his wife, Iris Hoffman, who made it. But, I don't know if you know this, but I am somewhat autistic. And I can just read things and inhale them and know everything. And there are two things that really bother me. There are a couple places where I say I really love this film, which I had never seen at that point, but just thought that this is what this is part of being an adult. By the way, I have to correct you on one thing. I was actually 12 when that was made.
12.
But and
a very cute 12-year-old.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And then the other thing was, I was a dumb 12-year-old. And I started saying negative things about people who I really loved, including one woman who I had a mad crush on, and I don't like that, but it's that usual idiotic early teenage, almost teenage boy sort of handling things. So I don't like that. And I also don't like that. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have DVDs or anything like this. So a lot of the things I'm saying actually come out of William K. Everson, who's a very good person to copy if you're going to copy. But he was a brilliant guy, and he wrote a book called Classics of the Silent Screen, which was actually credited to a guy named Joe Franklin, who was a long famous New York radio and television host who played silent films, but I couldn't see them. So, like many young people, I was a bit of a fake. I've certainly learned it all since, and or an awful lot of it. But I keep. I'm a little bothered by it, but I shouldn't be. It's just very weird. And it's the reason why I've often, complained about prodigy kids, because, we get rather famous, as I was for a few years there. And, I had a whole lot of other stuff to do. I had puberty to go through. I had to go to school. And the other thing about me was really, since I was about, 5 years old, I could give you the names and dates of all the US presidents and quite a few of the British prime ministers as well, and their wives. And I really did have that down, but it was, it was just, everybody thought I was this little genius freak, and that was hard, especially in a small town on a college campus with my dad, being a professor there. I'm still glad I grew up in a small town, but I'll tell you, when I hit New York City, I just pretty much stayed here despite the couple other jobs I've had. And, I wish it was the New York I knew in 1975, but, can't have everything.
No.
Yeah, I can understand having lots of attention from a young age, and having expectations put upon you would be difficult. So I can completely understand that. But just to say, I don't think you come off particularly know-it-all-ish in the film. I think anyone with a camera in their face tries to act a bit cleverer than they are. But I don't think it comes off too badly.
Well, thank you. That's very nice to hear. That's extremely nice to hear. And I guess I'm glad the film exists, but it's one of those things which I've tried my damnedest just to make sure I know my stuff now. And it's a thing which also bothers me about my very early stuff at the Times, because, I knew a whole lot about Steve Reich and Phil Glass and Chopin, who I played, and Terry Riley and all that stuff. But then, they're sending me to obscure other things, which I knew nothing about, but thought I knew something about. And we didn't have YouTube in those days. We had a very small library online. I started the Times in 1982. And so, I get sent out to do, I remember one concert I went to, and it was actually pretty helpful to me because they wanted me to go cover a program of 14th century Korean court music. And
niche.
we had nothing at the Times to tell me anything about this. And so I just decided I would go and I would listen and I would try to describe. And I still think the judgment is always secondary in criticism. It's the description that matters the most. And I want to pay homage to a guy who's with us today. Barney, reading your book on Laurel Canyon was the person who turned me on to Judee Sill. And it happened to arrive at a time when I was very miserable. And I just started listening to her, and I found I had some ideas about her. And so I went to my to the desk and asked if I could write about her. I also did that about magnetic fields. I also did it by a group that I utterly love from your shores, the High Llamas. And, no one at the Post had heard of most of these people at the time. But I had ideas, and I still like those pieces because it's me really, really enjoying myself, trying to, tell people what I thought. And then Judee was another person like that. I guess my own sense is I never know what I'm going to be fascinated by next. And if I'm fascinated by it, and if I think I can do a better job than anyone else who's doing it right then, I'll go and I'll ask someone, say, I really want to write about this.
I'm really interested in what you were saying about the primacy of needing to describe as a critic, and what you said before that about the importance of sort of getting your facts right. I've heard you speak elsewhere about how you're fine for your students when you teach at USC to make whatever statements they want as long as the facts are straight in what they write. No mentions of saxophone solos in Beethoven symphonies, I think was the example that you used, which I enjoyed a lot. But in general, I wanted to ask what you think is the role actually then of the critic. If aesthetic judgments are so personal a thing, and you're trying to describe the music, that much is very important to criticism. But how does one bridge the gaps between those finely personal judgments and the description, and then the criticism, as it were, which by some accounts maybe ought to be the central part of arts criticism, or not?
I think they're all important. But the thing I mentioned about the Beethoven Sixth and its famous roaring saxophone solo, which of course does not exist, was I began, as do many critics, as sort of a Robespierre, off with their heads. If I didn't like them, I was going to just tell them about this. And I still do it. But nowadays, I've had enough critical reversals over time. And I love some things which I did not love back then. And I don't go back to what I said then, because there's nothing wrong with changing your mind. It was easier in the old days, because in the old days, there was so many music reviews around in the world. There were, just at the New York Times alone, we had 8 people writing a lot of pieces every week. My record for a week at the Times was 13, in a week. And that would be sometimes 4 events a day. And they had lots of money. And so they kept me doing it, and it kept me alive. My first son was born the last year I was at the Times. I hope I'm answering you. But let's go back to a little more of what you're asking. I nowadays very rarely take on anything unless I think there's going to be something I'll be very interested in, whether it is an artist, whether it is a book, whether it's some, whatever happens. I'm sure London is still better than we are here in New York with reviews. But there's so people reviewing things. So if it's somebody right out of Juilliard who doesn't play like Vladimir Horowitz, there's no point in saying something like, well, it'll certainly never be Vladimir Horowitz. And of course, I don't know whether it'll be Vladimir Horowitz, so I don't write much now unless I really feel there's a hatchet job to be done. and then I will do it. But it's really rare for me now. And the job has to be done on somebody who I've spent some time with, not personally, but spent some time with their work. And I have to really feel that way. One of the things that I said is that the easiest kind of review to write is the negative one, the one where you're trying to be somebody completely I'm talking just about writing, because we have a whole lot more ways of being dismissive. And when you say, oh, it was so lovely, it was wonderful, that's harder. And then the hardest thing to do, if you're talking classical music mostly, is writing about something which is in the middle, like it. For instance, I always say that about the hardest thing to write about would be writing about a Vivaldi concert in the basement of a church. And, it's likely the music is not going to blow you completely away. It's likely you've heard it before. The people who go are not the leading musicians in town. They tend to be kind of people in the neighborhood and who want to go. The people who are playing are probably not getting paid very much, if at all. And there's absolutely no reason whatsoever, to me anyway, to go and just say, oh, it won't change your life, but it's, you've probably heard it before, da 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 da. And, because it's a very genuinely good thing that these concerts happen, I mean, the thing I hate about my earliest writing for the New York Times was I seemed to have this crazy idea that tenors could be divided into two categories, Pavarotti and not Pavarotti. And, it was really a dumb idea to begin with. But I feel bad now. And I've occasionally apologized to people who I've met through what is now, we're pushing 50 years now. Other times they still hate me, and, I can't necessarily blame them for it. I wanted to be funny. I wanted to be like Mencken or George G. Nathan, the theater critic here in the States, or, I loved British satire. And I grew up on people like Aldous Huxley and Evelyn Waugh. And so being funny was something I tried to do, as long as it wasn't just stupid funny.
For what it's worth, I must note that I loved your savaging of Paul McCartney's Liverpool oratorio. But let's leave that there. I wanted to just go back to what you the artist you mentioned earlier. I mean, I'm holding up for listeners. I'm holding up now a copy of Tim Page on Music, which includes some of the pieces you referred to, including pieces about the High Llamas and Stephin Merritt and Magnetic Fields.
Captain Beefheart, too.
Captain Beefheart's in there. Yeah. Frank Sinatra's in there. So I loved those pieces when I first read them in this book. Oh, yeah, really. And for this reason, we have chosen an audio interview with Future Bible Heroes, one of Stephin Merritt's many side projects from 2002, just because we thought it might amuse you to hear the lugubrious tones of Stephin Merritt. So I'm going to ask Jasper to tell us about this audio.
Of course, yeah. So as you said, it's Andy Gill talking to, well, he expects to be talking just to Stephin Merritt, but he starts the interview and it turns out to be Stephin Merritt, but also Claudia Gonson and Chris Ewan.
Oh, yeah. Lovely people, all of them.
It's very interesting to hear them talk as a trio. And they're quite firm initially with Andy when he sort of says, I thought I'd just be talking to Stephin. I think it's Claudia who says, well, we made a rule that there would be no solo interviews for Stephin because it's actually Chris that writes all the music for this group. So that was interesting in itself.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, they have this lively, it's about an hour and a quarter long, and the quality is largely very good. They're outside, you can hear some sort of bird song and stuff. They talk about their live setup and their approach to making records, their audience, and the differences between Merritt's different projects, Magnetic Fields, The Sixth, Future Bible Heroes. The first clip that we'll listen to is about Magnetic Fields, or rather about 69 love songs, and within that, which of the genres that he explores in those songs Stephin Merritt prefers.
Which of the various genres let's say on 69 love songs do you most enjoy A, listening to, and B, playing in?
I would get really, really sick of whatever genre I was tied down to. It wouldn't really matter which one it was. I don't like music well enough to be tied down to any particular type of it. I would get bored very, very quickly. Some people just like any kind of music they do, I think. I just don't feel that way.
Are there any genres that you feel more natural for you to work?
Certainly, as a singer, I'm not too good with opera, for example. I have a much better Johnny Cash imitation than Karen Carpenter imitation, even though I would probably rather sound like Karen Carpenter.
The book of love is long and boring. No one can lift the damn
thing. He's quite contrary in this. I mean, when you read your interview that you did with him, Tim, in 2000, you sort of say, well, he has a reputation for being surly and difficult with interviewers, but I didn't find him that way.
Not at all.
Find him in this audio interview a little bit off with Andy. And I tell you what is also interesting, before we get to the second clip, Jasper, what's interesting to me is that in your interview, Stephin Merritt says to you that I learned to write songs almost entirely by listening to ABBA. He complains that he read a punk rock magazine in about 1976 that said how terrible ABBA was and how it was something that your little sister would listen to. And that just made him want to listen to ABBA even more. But in this interview, he sort of disavows the influence of ABBA. So in 2 years, he's kind of changed his position a little bit and doesn't want to be pinned down, and I get that. And you had interviewed him just after 69 Love Songs had come out, like a couple of months maybe after that.
Yeah.
Extraordinary record came out. I mean, briefly, I know that our young colleagues here listened to or tried to listen to 69 Love Songs the other day and weren't too taken with it. I think you found it a little irritating. And I don't know whether that was just because these sort of Harvard smartasses just being a bit too clever with these 1.5 minute songs. I'd just be interested to know what your little beef was.
I think Jasper's got a more certified beef, so I'll leave it to him.
I actually found it sonically very dull, to be honest. There's nothing going on really that grabs my attention from a sonic perspective. And even though it keeps changing, I don't feel like they actually nail any one of the things they're trying to do. So for me, it was just a kind of like, a bit half-assed maybe.
He made that in a tiny little studio apartment, and no one ever thought it was going to be the hit that it, eventually turned out to be. I love some of the songs, and there's some which I think he does very beautifully. Do you want me to talk about favorites? I mean, everybody is entitled not to like something. I don't like a lot of stuff which is very popular, and I'm fine with it. And I also never mind somebody disagreeing with me. I like it perhaps a little better if they agree with me, but unless I ended up finding myself, I won't say immoral or anything like that, but it's just, I'm 71. I don't have that much more time. And it's so hard to get anything into any big paper these days, which is the reason why I'm more or less, you don't have to ask me to write something about Queen, which is a group I can't bear. And I don't like much Paul McCartney after Bluebird. I like some, but I thought that was just an unbelievably pretentious event. I hope I'm answering your question. It is not all about sound in the way, and I can come up with another person who really is all about sound, and that's Sean O'Hagan from, the High Llamas, because you just listen to that and you just listen to the sound. And for me, at least, musically, that stuff is remarkable. 69 Love Songs, I still love a great deal of that album. And actually, the ones I like best tend to be the ones that Stephen sings himself. Something like, I don't want to get over you, or perhaps my favorite song, and this may have something to do with one of my great mentors, Asleep and Dreaming, sounds exactly like it is from a Virgil Thompson opera. It's just a accordion pulling in, pulling out, and that one is really from the heart. It has always seemed to me. And there probably another 10 or so, but I found things like Punch Drunk Love kind of funny, and Experimental Music Love, and but he was a kid, he was trying to do it, he's still doing this stuff 30 years later, and I have to take my hat off to him. Weirdly enough, when he does sound really, when somebody does it and does it in a poetic, beautiful way, I don't like some of his songs. For instance, Peter Gabriel sang The Book of Love, and it was used in some film, and it brought my friends a lot of money. And when I used to teach it in class, I like the way Stephen does it. It's a droll, dark song, and Peter Gabriel, all the sound goes up, and it's just not what the song's about. If Peter Gabriel had wanted to do a Stephin Merritt song, I probably could have suggested it. But for me, and nothing at all against Peter Gabriel, nothing at all against him, I just don't think he got that song. I can think of other people who didn't get songs. I mean, you ever heard Judy Collins' version of Salt of the Earth?
What, the Rolling Stones song?
The Rolling Stones song.
No, I don't think I ever have.
And it's here singing it, and she changes the words around to make them nice. And that's a snotty song.
Yes.
And nothing against Judy Collins. It just didn't work.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about what you love about 69 Love Songs, because I also really enjoyed reading what you wrote about them, and in reading what you write makes me want to like the music. It's just that every time I put it on, I'm like, it's not getting there for me. Which is, because you say like parody and cliche are taken to that giddy and exhilarating point where they become fresh once again. And some of the lyrics that you quote are brilliant. Love is like jazz, concluding with the observation that both love and jazz are divine, asinine, depressing, and almost entirely window dressing. That's a great lyric, But at the same time, it could also be, I have to admit that I haven't fully immersed myself in 69 Love Songs. It's just It's just that when we have listened to it, I don't know. There was just something that put me off it in various ways, but that's music ultimately. It's nice to listen to the three of them talking.
Yeah, they're terrific people.
Should we just listen to the second clip?
Yeah,
since it is about 69 love songs.
It's about 69 love songs. So I was, it's really nice to listen to the three of them talking. And Chris Ewan comes out with this funny story about seeing 69 love songs live at the Lincoln Center.
Oh yeah, I was there for that.
I was at the Magnetic Field Show at Lincoln Center when they performed the 69 love songs over the course of 2 nights. And at the end of the second night, the audience wanted
more.
An encore to 69 love songs.
Yeah, A, you can't do that when the show's called 69 Love Songs, and B, we just performed for 4 hours.
They ended up doing
a song again.
John Cage. They ended up doing 433. And they timed it, and it was wonderful.
Great encore. Great choice of encore.
Very amusing. Very droll, as you said.
Claudia's so funny and so warm, and I'm very fond of them. Because I don't write regularly about pop music, I'm not going to be like my friend and former colleague Wayne Robbins is, who just knew that he'd have to write something about the next Billy Joel album every couple of years. And, so, because he was a Long Island guy, and God knows Billy Joel was a Long Island guy. And I don't have any of that. I can just get excited about something. I can write about it. I can write about it with real love. The Judee Sill album, which, I read about first from Barney, that was happening when I was going through a divorce from somebody I utterly love. And it's one of those things like, I didn't hear Astral Weeks for 7 years after it came out. And then it came out at the perfect time. And then the reissue of the 2 studio albums it just blew me away. I really thought it was extraordinary. And, I thought I had stuff to say about it. So I did,
Well, we're including the beautiful piece you wrote about Judee.
Oh, I'm glad.
Which was from 2006. We're including that in the free feature on Judee Sill when this
I'm so glad.
Episode goes out. So I'm just going to read a couple of bits from that piece with your blessing, I hope, Tim.
Sure.
But just to make the point, because it was exactly my experience, you wrote, such was the obscurity to which Sill had fallen in 1979 when she died, that no obituary was published, and a number of her friends never knew what had happened to her until many years had passed. And then you mentioned that, so her kind of mentor in a sense had been, or her sort of facilitator, benefactor, David Geffen, who'd signed. She was the first artist on Asylum Records, as I'm sure you know, Tim.
Yeah.
It's Tom King's book, The Operator, a 650-page biography of David Geffen. I think here it was called The King of Hollywood or something like that. And it had a picture of Keanu Reeves on the cover, which really pissed Geffen off. But that's an aside. Yeah. But anyway, so you note that this 650-page biography of David Geffen devotes just one sentence to Judee Sill, calling her a former prostitute and reformed junkie. And that's it. That's all it says about Judee Sill, which is heartbreaking. But subsequent to the publication of that biography, she has been discovered / rediscovered by umpteen people, including you and me. And it's one of those things, isn't it? I suspect this applies to both of us, maybe all of us. I had just assumed, unforgivably, that Judee was just another one of those female singer-songwriters who weren't as good as Joni Mitchell, and there were a number of them, and it was something about her name. It's just like, yeah, she's just. I just kind of never imagined that when I first heard, but put on Crayon Angels in a rental car in LA, just to see what Judee Sill sounded like. And it was this like an instant, oh my God. I mean, and then the next song, and then the next, and how the hell did I not know about this woman? One of the lovely things actually for me over the last week or so is finding out that unlike with Stephin Merritt and Magnetic Fields, that that Jasper and William both did their homework and listened to Judee Sill, and as far as I can gather, both as smitten as we were all those years ago,
glad.
Tim. So I'm just going to ask both of them really. Jasper, I mean, just tell us how you responded to the sound of Judee Sill.
Well, I can't say that I had ever consciously listened to her before last week. And we were preparing for interviewing you today, Tim, and we're talking about what we're going to talk about. And Barney mentioned Judee Sill, and I thought, there's a name. Let's have a listen. And yeah, I was just totally bowled over by what I heard. And I listened to both albums back to back, and then listened to them again back to back. And then I was away last week and they totally accompanied that trip. I downloaded them before I went. And it's just one of those rare occasions when you hear music and you think, this is going to accompany me through life now. This is a part of my own musical tapestry, where I just found it so beautiful and enchanting and interesting and precise, but also in a world of its own as far as the different influences being drawn in and being made a lot of. And so I think that it's actually a case where, reading between the lines and what you said earlier about what you feel the role of writing about music can be, is that actually there are things that don't get the appreciation that they deserve, that should be shouted about from the rooftops. And jokingly, I said to Barney, I think earlier this week, I can't believe you never told me about Judee Sill before. We talk a lot about music in the office, but she'd just never come up. And so, but at the same time, I also think maybe it was just the right time for me to want to listen to that kind of music. Maybe if I'd heard it 10 years ago, I would have thought this isn't for me. So
I was just waiting till we could get Tim Page on the podcast. I was saving it for that.
I am so honored to be here. I'm just so happy with this. It's funny that you say that today, because I have an article in the Wall Street Journal. I don't share the Wall Street Journal's politics, but they really actually let you write seriously about music, and they like me very much. And so I wrote something today about one of those things. It's in today's paper, and I'll happily send you a link, about this wonderful soprano named Lorraine Hunt Lieberson. And she's classical, although she did other stuff too. And I remember I was listening to her last concert in Washington, and the rumor was all over the place that she was going to die very soon. And it did turn out to be her last time in Washington, and she was dead about 3 months later. But listen to her, because I talk about the fact that I knew at the time it was going to be something that would stay with me all my life. And then when she died 3 months later, it just took on this terrible sadness for me. But anyway, if you want that as a little hint to other people to read other kind of things, although I think what you do is terrific.
If I could just follow on from what Jasper said, I also just had a really, enchanting experience listening to Judee Sill for the first time, which was sort of listening into the office, but actually after Barney's bigging up, I didn't really want to listen till I could properly hear it, which was on my bicycle down Oxford Street, where I'd queued it up. Jesus Was a Crossmaker. And I went from looking at the traffic lights and having music very much in the background to listening to the melodies and the riffs and the voice of Judee Sill. And I could notice the music actually overcoming my the sense of vision that I had, really. So it became in the front of my mind more than the cycling had been.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Reminding me his song remains reminding me he's a bandit and a heartbreaker. Oh, but Jesus was a crossmaker.
But what was interesting to me was actually, I think I've sort of got my finger on it, which is her melodies can be really intricate, and her themes are baroque, as she says in interviews and things. But at the same time, some things like the riffs and the melodies are proper pop riffs, I think. Something like Jesus Was a Crossmaker is it's a mixture. It's like an alloy of those two disciplines. Somehow.
And there's also, and I'm not surprised that she loved his music, but her second or third song that was ever recorded, and this was the first song that was recorded by a then pretty famous group who got screwed over by the music business, as so many people had. But, you put on Lady O, and the second verse is, and I'm not saying this is wrong, because all artists absorb and take in, but she is singing her second verse, and it really, in my opinion, comes very much from "I Just Wasn't Made for these times," the beginning of it. And she goes, "I keep looking for a place to da da da." That's the Brian stuff, because I can't remember the lyrics. But, good artists listen to a whole ton of stuff, unless they're these kind of raging genius who just have one thing that they follow. But, I think you can hear a lot of things in her. I even think the ending of The Donor with the timpani, the last real song on Heart Food, I hear Stravinsky in that, weirdly enough. Not fully absorbed Stravinsky, but there's Stravinsky there,
Well, on the cover of that album, Tim, she's there like with a conductor's baton in her hand, which I think is very, very significant.
Yeah.
So you assume she was, but certainly at some points, conducting the string sections and woodwind and stuff that was layered over the songs on Heart Food. I think she was just, the word genius is so used and abused. But if she isn't a genius, then nor is Brian Wilson. They both are musical geniuses, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
You this beautiful thing. I just wanted to quote from that piece in 2006. She's an artist of extraordinary gifts, one whose best songs are suffused with a radiant, prayerful, and excruciatingly tender innocence, all the more affecting because it must have been so hard won. So thank you for those words.
Beautiful.
I keep looking for a place to fit in where I can speak my mind.
I've been trying hard to keep from leaving you, but from the start, my heart just rolled and flowed.
Now, Tim, we normally finish with just our colleagues here are going to just tell us about a handful of pieces added to the Rock Back Pages library in the last couple of weeks. And feel free to comment on any of those if you so desire.
Sure. I am such a dinosaur by this point.
Guys, who's going to start with?
I might start with...
You've got the earliest piece, I think. So.
In Sounds in October 1970. From an uncredited writer, we think it might have been licensed to Sounds from an American paper or just another paper, but we still need to chase down who the author was.
Oh,
and it's about Janis Joplin after she died, but it's an interview published with her called Miss Janis, Texas White Queen of Rock. He says, Janis Joplin came out of Texas like a white big Mama Thornton. Wild and powerful, she shouted the blues with Big Brother and the Holding Company until she became too much for them and split a little over 2 years ago. The news of her death this week comes at a time when she at last found the band she wanted. She talked about the new band in this, one of her last interviews. They talk about the new band leaving the Brother Holding Company and just how happy she is with the new direction her music is going in, which is obviously all the more poignant given what we know. Yeah. And to add insult to injury, there's this question from the uncredited writer. There's a theory about you. It says that Janis Joplin is a being with no future, that your performance, the excesses of voice and energy are a constant attempt to push yourself past your physical limits, that you give everything for the moment, including the future, that you know all this and you exult in it. Yours is a dance of self-destruction and you're grooving on it. And she responds saying, oh man, I'll tell you something. What I do with my life, that's my business. But I have noticed that people, journalists, kids, audiences, whoever, they like to think that their artists are destroying themselves. It gives them an aura of drama. You know, Billie Holiday's a junkie. Ooh, Janis Joplin's killing herself. Oh, isn't it wonderful? You know, they like their blues singers dying. They don't like their blues singers rocking. So they're going to figure some theory out anyway. I'm rocking, at least. I think I am.
Wow.
And it's quite powerful, really, to think of. And yeah, just amazing that she sort of plays down this cult of death that does exist around, particularly artists her age who died at 27. Sure. So yeah, particularly prescient.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's very good. And I have a pretty good memory. And I think I've read that article. And I'm trying to figure out who the writer might be, you know, and I don't think I can, unfortunately. I had a bad injury to the head about 11 years ago, but I bet I could have ID'd that. And I'm half tempted to say, but he had his own magazine, so why would he be writing about this? Paul Williams. It sounds a little Paul Williams-y to me.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll check that out. I mean, there is no obligation to know who the uncredited writer is off the top of your head, obviously. That would be quite impressive.
But it's lovely. It's lovely. It's very, very good writing. And one thing I work very hard on is my prose.
Good.
That's all too clear.
Yeah.
What's next, guys?
So the next is an article from October 2001 in Blender, and it's an interview with Ozzy Osbourne by Rob Tannenbaum, just simply titled Ozzy Osbourne. So it starts off, what becomes an acid-eating, ant-snorting, dove-beheading, metal godfathering legend most? Your devilish questions, of course. So this is questions from the internet in 2001 to Ozzy Osbourne. But the intro before the first question is, after years as a legendary mess, Osbourne is a musician again. Though he's happy to talk entertainingly about the messes as well as about the music. Ozzy says, thank God people have stopped asking me what bats taste like. It's so lame. Well, the Blender readers haven't entirely forgotten the bat. So the first question is from Chew85 in Santa Barbara, California. If you had to do it over again, would you eat the bat? Ozzy says, no, I would bite the head off a bat. I believe that it wasn't meant to happen, but don't relish that on my tombstone. It'll be Ozzy Osbourne, the man who bit the head off a bat in Des Moines, Iowa. I mean, it's so long ago. And the next question is, what was the worst job you ever had? Ozzy says, my first job ever was at a slaughterhouse. There was a giant mountain of sheep's stomachs, and my job was to get this knife and cut them up and empty the puke out the stomachs. I was so tired of throwing up, my eyes were bugging out of my head from straining. It was very smelly, very disgusting place. Everyone who eats meat should walk through an abattoir. You will not make 4 steps in that thing without puking your guts out, I guarantee. Just classic Ozzy there. So
yeah, that's terrific.
Lovely.
Jasperini.
I've got a couple of things. First of which is an extraordinary piece of writing by Nick Tosches in Coast magazine in April 1973. It's somewhat of its time. It's about Tom T. Hall. It begins, shift back, cool breeze. It's 1967. The universe hums. Pimply waifs flit about, lighting reefers with a Zoroastrian fire. The music is Gnostic, epiphanous, chords born of mudra, lyrics reminiscent of Swinburne and Canlari, pro-salute, anime audit, and the celebration of life, white noise fit to French fry your brain, and of course, the poetry of rock. It's just an incredible introduction to a piece about Tom T. Hall. He does eventually start writing about Tom T. Hall in this piece. What is it that makes Tom T. Hall a star, if you will, on these trendy horizons? His voice is no big deal. His abilities on the guitar can be described, if one be of a kind bent, as limited. But those things don't matter. Vocal and musical non-excellence never stopped Bob Dylan. Tom T. Hall, you see, is a really fine songwriter. The T, by the way, as Hall explains in the liner notes to his greatest hits album, the liner notes were nominated for a Grammy this year, but Mercury still hasn't paid Hall the $50 they owe him for writing them, stands for whatever I stand for, which is playing the guitar and singing through my nose, which is what all country people who are in this business do, which is not what we do by choice, but mostly all we know how to do, which is why people who are 7 or 8 feet tall play basketball and we can't.
Oh, that's wonderful.
He writes songs about drinking and traveling and fucking and drinking and eating and boring people and hanging around. Not in a heavy, pretentious sort of infranaturalistic way, say like Loudon Wainwright or John Prine, but in a very, well, let's see, I'll just sit here and write a song about it sort of way. I just think, I mean, whatever, one makes of Tom T. Hall's music, I just think as a piece of writing, it's quite
that's
brilliant.
really good.
That's beyond Gonzo. It's beyond Gonzo and what Toshis was on when he wrote
something. Zoroastrian fire of some description.
Oh yeah, that was a really good drug. Sorry.
Yeah.
Didn't he write something, sort of a legendary article, and I've not been able to find it. I haven't checked with you because I'm at a point where my brain kind of just goes out. But didn't he write a famous piece about Sally Goes Round the Roses?
By the
Sally,
the
Janettes.
Janettes.
And it's in some collection. And I'm another one of those, people who just think it's one of the greatest rock records ever made.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I've always wanted to read it. And anyway, if you happen to find it, I would be very grateful if you would make me a copy, because it's about the only thing about these folks, these 3 kids from the Bronx, who did you know it was the song that Andy Warhol played most in his famous studio when he was taking movies and doing things? He just adored it. And of course, he's right. It's a amazingly weird song. I still have no idea exactly what it's about. All the suggestions that I hear about it all sound like pretty plausible.
Well, it's great that we got the Janettes into this episode.
Oh yeah, man. Great.
Tasha certainly did write an amazing book about country music called Country, the Biggest Music in America, which is full of just scurrilous, scabrous stories about the degenerate musicians of Nashville. We'll see if we can find Toshis on the Janettes.
And then he wrote Sonny Liston.
Yeah.
He had the most strange and interesting taste. And
brilliant writer. Absolutely brilliant writer. You have something else for us, Jasper?
One thing just to wrap things up, which takes us through to 2014, the 24th of September, by Michael A. Gonzalez for the Red Bull Academy magazine, the story of the Highland Place Mobsters, the unlikely story of the best 90s R&B group you've never heard of, which is just interesting because they're one of those forgotten groups, although Dallas Austin, who was involved with them, did go on to greater success with Boys to Men and others. But it's just a nice retrospective piece by a writer whose work I love, Michael Gonzalez. And he writes about a gig that he went to see. From the moment Highland Place came on, backed by a band, their energy level was high. The young men stalked across the stage as though they were the second coming of the Bad Brains. For some reason, Manic got the bright idea to stage dive as though moshing was an R&B thing. He picked a bad spot to dive, colliding head-on with a young woman who was with Dr. Dre and the Death Row stable. It was crazy, Lamont Bowles, former LaFace head of artist development, remembers. The girl got a concussion, had to be rushed to the hospital. After the show, there was an emergency meeting in our suite, while Death Row was milling around downstairs. We told them we would take care of all medical expenses, but they were still plotting to do them harm. Dallas liked saying he was street, but he wasn't really street. The Death Row guys were really street, and they had the LaFace team nervous as hookers in a church.
Terrible. Very nice. I mean, there's so much marvelously good writing about the arts and about rock and pop, and and there are people you just find them here and there, and you're sort of stunned by what they can do. You know, it's just, yeah, I mean, this is all wonderful writing.
Oh, well, glad you enjoyed it, Tim. And we are so just delighted and honored to have your wonderful writing on Rock's Back Pages. And of course, it would always be good to get some more, because I don't even know how much you've done on non-classical music. But let's leave it there. We've got at least probably about 30 pieces by you, including the Sonata and the B-Fart. And I really recommend
I'm so glad.
to anyone who's listening, do check out Tim's writing on Rock's Back Pages. And of course, you know, now in the Wall Street Journal, Tim's back pages are something else. This brings us to the end of episode 232 of the RBP podcast. Many thanks to you, Tim, for talking to us about your career as a music critic and your particular love for Judee Sill. It was really special to talk about. Do follow our podcast on whichever platforms you use, and please consider subscribing to Rock's Back Pages itself. We will return in a fortnight with Brian Cullman to discuss
oh my gosh, he's a wonderful writer.
Oh, okay.
Too.
I'm so glad you. Yeah, well.
He's terrific.
His book, Preparing for the Past, published by Michael Zilka's Z Books. I actually read it a few months ago when Michael sent me a PDF. It's this fantastic book. So I'm really looking forward to talking to Brian about that. And at this point, we say farewell. It's goodbye from us, and it's goodbye from our guest, and all together now in imperfect harmony. Goodbye.
That concludes episode 232 of the Rock's Back Pages podcast. Many thanks to special guest Tim Page. Find his writing in the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and, of course, on Rock's Back Pages. Those to Barney Hoskins and William Pike, and it was co-hosted and produced by Jasper Murison-Bowie. The Rock's Back Pages podcast is part of the Pantheon Podcast Network. You can find thousands of articles, as well as hundreds of full-length audio interviews at rocksbackpages.com.